Before we start this, I would like to say this story was inspired by the song Enchanted by Taylor Swift, so yay Taylor Swift. Yeah, Happy New Year, Leila. I hope you like it. You barely ascended a month ago, which is when you were discovered and given a position as an acolyte in the Heavenly Palace. You still don't know how to talk to the other acolytes. The Grand Mayor is the only person you feel comfortable talking to since your discovery. However, even she was sometimes unavailable. Today, particularly, is a little bit sad, because it's lunch, which is when you exchange gossip with the white-haired mistress. Despite her old age, she's fairly young at heart. She loves talking about who's courting who and all that. She also loves to tease you about Crown Prince Lian, much to your dismay. Down in the mortal world, when you were a kid, you loved hearing stories about the great Crown Prince. You fell in love with him at first story, if you can believe it. It's a funny thing, loving someone you've never met. Lots of people berated you for it, your mother included, though you couldn't explain it. You knew they'd never understand, and for that reason alone, you never tried to explain it. Grand Mare isn't always busy during the acolyte's lunch, but right now she has a meeting, so you're on your way to the next best place, the Heavenly Library. Wearing your favorite acolyte dress, the color as green as a mint sky, you swiftly walk down the marble corridors, your lunch wrapped in a single cloth. The storekeeper was at his usual spot in the front of the large swirling desk. It whisked around, circling him more and more. "Hello," you waved, your hands caught in the dim afternoon light, and as you stalked closer toward the petite man, so did the rest of your skin, the exposed bits at least. The storekeeper looked up from his current read, his wan hand catching in the light as well. He smiled, assessing the situation. "Is Grandmere busy today?" You nodded your head a little sullenly. The storekeeper patted his seat next to him. "Come sit." Your smile widened. You strode over, beaming with excitement. The older people in the Heavenly Palace really got no credit for their personality. You set your lunch on the large desk in front of you, having to stand on your tippy toes as you scooted onto the elongated bench. "How have you been, storekeeper?" He waved you off and motioned toward your cloth-wrapped lunch. "I don't suppose you brought something for this old man?" Chuckling, you began to undo the cloth, always for you. The storekeeper merely chuckled and pulled open a drawer. "How have you been, Leila?" You adjusted your glasses, so clear you could see through them like a telescope or a magnifying glass, then brushed back a few brown-black curls. "I've been good." Finally, the storekeeper found what he was looking for and set it in front of you. You looked at the leather-wrapped pages, curiously, holding back a smile, then at him. "A new book?" The storekeeper nodded, reaching for a piece of boneless chicken. "One I just know you're going to love." You cocked an eyebrow. "Is it going to teach me how to keep better company?" His throat rumbled in laughter again. Yeah. "Have you seen the Crown Prince today?" A rather direct change in subject, but you don't mind, not at all. "He's here?" You almost choke on your own spit. "Of course, you didn't know?" The storekeeper licked his fingers. "No?" You almost shout. The Crown Prince was rarely at the Heavenly Palace, but when he was, you made it an absolute priority to at least get a glimpse of him, though you were sure he'd forgotten all about who you were since that first meeting. The unusual acolyte. You were too busy fawning over him to hear an actual single thing he'd said. And everything he'd said, well, most of the things he'd said, a gurgle of laughter peeked from you. Grandmere never misses a chance to tease you about it, pissing you off without fail. Your eyes narrow at the thought alone until the storekeeper breaks your thoughts. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" You looked upon the old man, who had blanched somewhat. "Storekeeper?" You asked, leaning in to feel his forehead. "You look a little pale. Are you okay?" The storekeeper, in a desperate attempt, it seems, to get you to pay attention, jerked his head to the right. The movement alone made your head turn a little, but then his thumb jabbed, not so subtly, to the side. You turned your head, fully this time, and caught the gaze of Your Highness! you practically shrieked. His chuckle was nothing short of adorable. That's right. He put his hands up. I'm sorry for interrupting. No, He looked at the storekeeper, but he looked like he might throw up if the mouth opened. So you looked at the prince again, but this time as calmly as you could. Sorry. You looked down, sure that he could see your embarrassment. Again, it's fine. He looked at you for a beat, looked through your glasses and into your dark brown eyes. You thought you'd faint before he looked away, but eventually he turned his attention to the storekeeper, who was looking no less ill than he was before. I was looking for a book. A story? The storekeeper nodded. What, The old man looked at you, then back at the prince. Are you looking for a specific book? It was pathetic. Utterly pathetic. No one else, not a single thing person in heaven stuttered when talking to the crown prince. Yet here you were. You felt your cheeks burning with extreme heat, and if you did not throw cool water on your face, you just knew you were going to faint. Leila? You jerked your head to the side. Yes? The storekeeper looked at you expectantly, a large grin covering up any trace of his earlier sickness. He nodded again toward the prince. You turned to face Crown Prince Lian. Sure, you were going to pass out any second. The prince may have taken notice, because he leaned in and put a hand on your forehead. You went still, unable to breathe, unable to look away from those lovely pale eyes. It seems perhaps you are the one who is in need of medical assistance. A covered-up snort from the side of you and, yeah, perhaps. You side-glared at the storekeeper, feeling more naked than ever. You just knew he was going to tell Grandmere about this later, and you would not hear the end of it. Was your suffering never to end? I'm fine. You choked out. Water. More snorts from beside you had you jerking your chin and gripping the storekeeper's arm from beneath. He let out a shriek, but you coughed to cover it up. He made to scurry off, but the crown prince stopped him. If you don't mind, I know you're having lunch, but I'm in search of a certain book and beg for your help. Of course, the storekeeper said, an obvious grin directed toward you. He smacked your shoulder none too lightly and pulled you close to him. Leila here would be ecstatic to help you in your journey. That would be much appreciated. The crown prince nodded, utterly clueless about everything, thank the heavens. You rounded the large ivory-colored desk and stood beside the prince. He was a good 4 inches taller, which you didn't mind whatsoever. You looked down to hide your grin, which the storekeeper did none of. With one last glare in his direction and a little vulgar gesture, you were off, walking the aisles of the old ancient library, with Crown Prince Lian. You had to keep your heart from thudding, from going in and out of place. Again, you thought of water. You made a deal with yourself to go take an ice bath after this. You clearly needed it. Are you okay? The prince asked from beside you. Yeah, you replied meekly. He frowned and turned away as if to hide it, but you caught it. So, what book are you looking for? It's a book about a kingdom long destroyed, he answered, looking down the aisle. Caught off guard, the words spilled from your mouth without much thought. You look reminiscent. That earned you a small smile, but not at you. He was looking down the aisle as if he were in fact someplace else. Is it? You bit your lip and looked away, frowning a bit. Is it the Lian kingdom? You are very intuitive. He spoke as if he were telling you a secret. I like to think that's my best quality. You smiled. I like you better this way, he said, your face heating up at the simple compliment. He laughed, covering it with his hand. I apologize, that must have sounded rude. You shook your head, turning down the aisle of history. The crown prince watched you run a hand up and down the plenty of books before stopping at a certain section. Aha! You squeaked. Found it. You turned to the crown prince. So, what exactly did you mean by your earlier statement? He coughed and turned away, beginning the walk back toward the front. You pulled out a thick, leather-bound book and followed the crown prince. Just that you seemed shy earlier. timid, like that might bite you. You almost laughed, but you caught yourself. He is, after all, still the crown prince. Not many people are like that around you. He turned, halting his walking to catch your eyes through the lenses of your glasses. No, you are the first. A quiet smile lined his lips, and he turned forward again and continued walking. Everyone else is quite fond of humbling me and my title. Despite respect, you ended up laughing at him. The generals, I assume? Yes, especially them. He laughed, sweat dripping down his forehead. Oh yes, I hear the stories. They are very inch of lovely, are they not? You looked at him, amusement and sarcasm shining in your eyes, and your quirked mouth helped not at all to hide it. Well then, you two must have had a fine time, the storekeeper said, clearing his throat. You blushed, but with your brown skin, you had lots of hope that it wasn't as obvious. We have indeed. The crown prince walked up to the storekeeper's desk. You hurried to mimic him and sat the thick book in front of the old man. Just this, please. The storekeeper nodded, scribbling something down in his notepad. You're all right to go. And so the crown prince nodded his thanks as you made your way back around the desk and took your seat again. Then, unexpectedly, if you do say so yourself, the crown prince turned his head in your direction and said, I enjoyed your company. Thank you for helping me in my search. May we meet again. You could just feel the smugness in the storekeeper's face. His body practically oozed it as he smiled at you, eyes crinkled a little too small to be normal. You fought to keep from fidgeting with your hands or smacking the storekeeper in the back of the head. Of course, I enjoyed your company as well. May we meet again. You went to bow your head, but the crown prince waved his hands. No, don't, honestly. Remember what I said before? He tilted his head to the side, with a smile that said you had a shared secret. His eyes, however, held something like friendly amusement. You fought to keep a stupid, silly grin off your face, but it came anyway. Right, Your Highness. It would have been considered respectful, had it not been for the tone you used. The crown prince only shook his head, his smile never fading as he grabbed the book and walked out of the library. You watched him all the way, and the storekeeper watched you, his grin telling you all you need to know. He knew too much. So, you have inside jokes with the prince now, If you mention it again, I'll break the spine of not just your books. You grinned at him as a witch might grin at children. The storekeeper shook his head. You and your threats. It's one of the many things you like about me, though. You popped a grape into your mouth and shrugged. A week later, the crown prince popped up out of nowhere and insisted he walk you to your next class. You talked about the book you helped him find, though he seemed to fall into his own world when talking about his old kingdom. I said he didn't talk about it often. There are many scars people bear, you know, and most are invisible. Most are mental scars. When the crown prince talked about his kingdom, you knew there was a line, so you refrained from asking too much, and willingly accepted anything he didn't mind sharing. The next time you saw Crown Prince Lian was a few days later, and that time you talked about mindless things, not really caring what the conversation drifted to. That had been a few months ago, and as summer and autumn came and went, you found talking to him easy and began looking forward to his random show-ups. You could talk to him for hours on end and not get bored, and eventually you showed more and more of yourself. You grew confident in talking about anything and everything. You told him about the exams that were stressing you when exam weeks were in, and did your best to console him whenever he had something stressing him. You loved painting with him. He once told you he had a very good friend who painted almost as well as you. You didn't fail to acknowledge the compliment, and replied with one of your own, saying how you'd once had a friend who spoke almost as elegantly as he did. He laughed, which in turn caused you to laugh. He praised your artwork, and you praised his dancing. A few weeks ago, he'd popped up unannounced and declared he'd teach you how to dance after someone you were inclined to think it was the storekeeper who told him, but kept your silence, told him you could not. He was completely right, though. You were horrid at the subject. Even the other acolytes, who were to put on a performance during New Year's solstice, and were very kind souls, said it would be better if you sat this one out. You had confided in Grandmere about it, who no doubt told Storykeeper, who told Crown Prince Lian. With all of these people swarming in your death, it was so hard to keep your cool, especially because you wanted to dance at New Year's solstice, whether it be with the other acolytes or not. Desperately, you accepted the Crown Prince's generous offer. You had been practicing whenever you were free, which the Crown Prince somehow was always free as well. You had a small inclination he made time, but didn't want to say anything for fear of being wrong and utterly humiliated. Today was the last of your sessions, so before entering the ballroom, where the New Year's solstice gala would be held, you sat in front of your mirror and adorned a few cosmetics and your favorite dress. It was one of the clothing you owned that had nothing to do with being an acolyte. You fastened your corset as best as you could alone and squeezed into your gown. It was a long, flowing piece, decorative with golden jewels that flowed like the wind against your legs. The color mint green, as all your favorite clothing was. The color against the complexion of your darker skin tone was fluorescent. It made a statement, and you liked it. You carefully placed golden butterfly clips throughout your thick, curly hair. You peppered an open cherry around your cheeks, blended it with your hand, and stared at yourself. A salve that acted as gloss for your lips was the final touch. You stood from your dresser and opened your door. The halls were full of bustle for the New Year's solstice gala. It was tonight. The Crown Prince had said he'd wanted to get one last practice in before the actual thing, to which you agreed. There were guards stationed outside the ballroom. One look at you and they stepped aside. Crown Prince Lian was seated on one of the many chairs in the back of the large room, where tables holding food stood. He brightened at the sight of you. "Is that what you're wearing?" You nodded. Sure, your cheeks heated just at the sight of him, wearing white, as always. The only noticeable difference being the gold that slithered around his long brown hair. He always had it pinned half up, half down, yet today he looked more princely than he ever had before. "Should we start then?" you said, looking up at him from beneath your lashes. He cleared his throat and looked away, a small blush, you couldn't help but notice, coating his cheeks. Of course. You walk up to him, hands moving to his broad shoulders, his hands gripping your waist. "Since this is the last one of our practices, why not start from the basics?" "To test me?" "Always." You mimicked his easy smile, falling into your usual quick remarks. "You've practiced by yourself?" he asked, twirling you, a mock laugh. "Maybe you need glasses too." You found your place against his chest and he chuckled, his breath coating your neck. "What would everyone say?" You gasped mockingly, trying to keep your heart in check. Oh no, the Crown Prince couldn't possibly adorn a pair of spectacles. Lian, as you've come to call him, shook his head, spinning you away from his chest and back in front of him. "You beseech me." Your hands leaned back on his shoulders. "There he goes with the proper talk again. However will I fare?" He lets go of your waist and bows at the same time you let go of his shoulders to pick up the fabrics of your dress and curtsy. "Maybe you should take after the Crown Prince, because that is all the rage this month." "Really?" He lifts an eyebrow, but a smile keeps finding its way back on his lips. How you wish you could touch them on your own. You force your eyes to snap back up and eye him fervently. "Certainly, you should see the other acolytes." He lets out a hearty laugh, holding out his arm for you to take. You do so and begin to walk with him around the ballroom while others continue on, preparing for tonight. "Leila." He stops you in front of the window that leads to the balcony that overlooks the heavenly kingdom. You look up, giving him your full attention. "All jokes aside, I have a question." "Ask away, I'm all ears." You hope your encouraging smile helps with whatever troubles he's having. He pulls his arms away from you and instead takes up your hands in his. The look he gives you is like a puppy begging for more treats. You almost coo at him right then and there, but get a grip on your emotions and face him with all the dignity you can muster. "Yes?" You say again. Lian takes a full breath, then looks out of the glass window, untangling your hands at the same time. Will you go to the New Year's solstice gala with me? You cover your mouth with your now free hands, utterly shocked. Lian mistakes your revelation for hesitance and begins to say, You don't have to answer right away, but you cut him off, throwing your hands around his shoulder, pulling him in for an embrace. Yes, just yes. Really? He wraps his arms around you as well, smiling down. Yes, you buffoon, yes. You might have thought I just asked you to marry me, he says sarcastically. You break away from him, a grin you are unable to help spills over your face, and you smack his arm. Ow. You give him a feline smile and back away. I'll see you tonight, Your Highness. You curtsy and sprint, completely unladylike, out of the large room. Grand Mère herself saw to it your cosmetics were touched up, along with the acolytes that were performing, since you were kicked out of their dance, with no real complaints from you. They thought you could at least introduce them and the dance, if you wanted. You accepted graciously, laughing as they finished preparing. You were going to walk in with Grand Mère, having no expectations from Lian. He, however, seemed the quite opposite. Right before you were to be announced with the other acolytes that were not in the dance, an arm grabbed and spun you around. The acolytes smiled faintly and walked out onto the giant red-clothed carpet. I can't believe you aren't going to wait for me, he said, pouting a little. You smiled and batted his arm away. I didn't know you wanted me to wait for you. His frown tilted upward just then. Come on, we're right after Grand Mère. You shook your head and shuffled behind the matron, who laughed into her fan, wiggling her eyebrows at you. You glared at the back of her head as she moved forward. You stepped up to the entrance of the enormous room. How are you this evening? He whispered, leaning down a bit. Fine, thank you. You smiled, even though your heart was drenched in nervousness. Lian pulled you out onto the open staircase, where you looked down at multiple patrons. Only the Emperor, who was clearly running a bit late, was the last to be introduced. The Lady Alkalites Leila on the arm of Crown Prince Lian. There were a few, finally grew a pair, directed at Lian, as he walked down the stairwell with you, waving, an unamused smile on his face as he stared down at the owners. A few minutes later, you had a drink in your hand, ready to toast to the new year and introduce the Alkalite dance that was said to perform every year, this one being your first, of course. As you stood at the dais, your eyes caught Lian's, and the accompanying warm, encouraging smile sent you into a tizzy. You gathered yourself well enough to call out the dance's name, Good Solstice Fortune. As you went to step off the dais, Lian was right there to lend you his arm. Your heart thrummed as you saw the silent words in his eyes. Have I told you how lovely you look tonight? You laughed, but covered your mouth. Lian pulled your hand away with his free one, saying, Don't cover it. You looked up at him. Is there a reason? He led you toward the back of the room, so you could better hear each other as the music for the dance began. He stopped at the perch of a slightly ajar window, looking down into the courtyard. He let go of your arm and turned to lean his back against it. Do you like making me smile? It was a little odd, but you nodded and told the truth, always. His smile was nothing short of appreciative. Then why would you want to hide something that is sure to bring one to my face? Even though your heart thundered in your ears, even though your shyness made you look down, unable to meet his gaze, you found it in yourself to say, barely audible with the music in the background, thank you. Whatever for? He said with a hint of playfulness. You looked up and were sure he saw everything, all of your secrets, all of the things you thought you'd hidden so well, all of your scars and fears and passions and loves, all there. You didn't feel naked, though. You didn't have words for how you felt, but as the clock struck midnight, and Chan looked down at your gorgeous coffee-colored, rose-tinted cheeks, murmuring, Happy New Year, Leila. As he leaned in, you could have sworn someone whispered into your head, Whole, Leila. Whole is what you are.